consideration of these conditions. I'm Andrew Griswold, I'm the Director of the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation. Most of you probably already know that Laura became the administrator of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act back in 2011-2012, and it's stayed in the department since that time. But in 2016, when the laws passed for the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the Marijuana Tracking Act, we created the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation to house all the functions related to the administration of these acts within one agency. We feel as though Michigan is positioned to be a leader in this regulatory space by consolidating all those functions into a singular agency approach. But we're happy to be here and help support the panel in performing your functions and considering these petitions. If there's anything we can do to help, please let us know. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director Briswell. We have some procedures by Legal Section Manager Colleen Curtis.
Good morning, panel members and those in the audience today. Thank you. My name is Colleen Curtis. I work for the department as the manager of the legal division for the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation. I will now give a brief overview of the statutory procedures. The statute or act that provides for the review panel is the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. This is initiated Law 1 of 2008, which was passed by the voters. Section 6 of this act requires the department to appoint members to the panel to review petitions that seek to add medical conditions. The act requires the panel to meet at least twice a year, and the meetings are governed by the Open Meetings Act. The panel is tasked with reviewing petitions that seek to add medical conditions to the list of debilitating medical conditions which can be found in the act. There is one other petition that condition that was added by a petition in 2014. These listed conditions are used for the written physician certification for qualifying patients' registry cards. This meeting today is one of the required public hearings, and its purpose is to take testimony or public comment only on the petitions before the panel. When the panel meets next, it will review its recommendation on the petitions to the director of the department. Section 5 of the Act requires the department director to make final determination 180 days from the date the complete petition is submitted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The purpose of this hearing is to take public comment, and it's really going to be comments only pertaining to the 22 petitions that were provided to the panel. This panel will not be responding to questions or addressing other topics. The panel will not be voting on the petitions at this public hearing. If you are intending to provide public comment, please fill out a comment card if you haven't done so already. Put your name on it and the medical condition or petition that you are speaking on, if you could. Please also indicate the medical condition or petition at the microphone when it is your turn to speak. This meeting, as a part of the Open Meeting Act, is also being recorded in the sense that we would like to make sure that if you are speaking, please use the microphone, and if we're having any hearing problems, we may ask you to speak more directly into the microphone. For any comment cards that have not already been turned in, please hand them to the Bureau staff. And when your name is actually called, please speak at one of the microphones in the audience. And I believe we just have this one right here. Is that correct? Okay. Because there are 22 petitions before us today, and we want to give an opportunity for absolutely anybody to be heard, please try to limit the comments at this time to 10 minutes. We will be as flexible as we can to accommodate everybody, however. So I thank you all for coming today, and I believe that we can now open, unless there's any other discussion by the panel, we can now open for public comment. Okay, so we're going to start with conference. All right, I'm going to, this is by Paul Meyer, Dr. Paul Meyer, I believe MD. If you could come to the microphone.
No, is the mic?
A little low.
Fix it.
Oh, you better speak right in there.
Better?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. I've been a board-certified family physician for about 26 years now. I've always included holistic treatments, including herbal medicine in my practice. I currently work in the areas of substance abuse and mental health and opioid dependence. I started certifying patients for cannabis use in 2009, shortly after the forms arrived and became available. I wondered initially who was going to show up in my office. People looking at legitimization of the recreational use, but no, the people who showed up were mostly older people, qualifying conditions, especially chronic pain and musculoskeletal problems. A common theme was the desire to avoid narcotics and other prescription medicines with the potential for serious side effects. I quickly figured out that cannabis was quite effective for a number of conditions. I started doing research. Research taught me a few things over the course of a couple of years. Cannabis has long been used safely, effectively all around the world for hundreds and even thousands of years for a wide range of conditions. It's remarkably well tolerated, and there's a minimum of any serious side effects or risks to human health. Cannabis has been essential to human culture all through history, a wide range of areas: nutritional, agricultural, medical, industrial, spiritual. It's amazing how important cannabis has been all through human history. Medical evaluation of cannabis started quite early in the late 1800s in India. There's been quite a few studies, a dozen or so major studies, none of which have found any serious risks to human health by the use of cannabis, and many of which support its use for a number of conditions. I believe that the use of medical cannabis should be extended by this panel for the newly proposed conditions for a number of reasons. There's good documentation for all of them that cannabis is safe and effective. More importantly, patients tell us that their problems associated with these conditions are helped by cannabis. This should not be surprising. Our brains, our nervous systems are already running on endogenous cannabinoids. The endocannabinoid system controls virtually everything, or at least modulates, influences everything we feel and think and much of our behaviors. A study was done on MS patients, MS patients, multiple sclerosis. Somewhat surprisingly, they couldn't really measure a decrease in their muscle spasms, but all of the patients wanted to continue cannabis after the short study. This should not be surprising. They wanted this because it made them feel better. Patients said, this medicine makes us feel better. We want it, even if the little machine didn't prove that our muscle spasms were better. Limiting the medical use of cannabis to any short list of approved conditions makes no sense. Cannabis is safe. Cannabis has been shown to be effective for a wide range of problems. The MMMA currently allows doctors to determine patients' suitability for cannabis certification and use. If patients are currently using cannabis for a wide range of medical conditions, reason and compassion must compel us to expand the system to allow physicians to certify patients for these conditions. Government should take this opportunity to facilitate the use of a safe and effective herbal medicine, to step back from interference with the rights of citizens to use it responsibly and effectively without fear of prosecution. This becomes more and more important as narcotic pain relievers become less available due to recognition of their dangers on the part of physicians. As studies continue to demonstrate that cannabis can dramatically reduce the use of narcotics, increased availability of cannabis is being recognized as part of a solution to the overuse of opioids. The alternative of continued criminalization prolongs the senseless and harmful war on the most vulnerable among us. which has done untold damage to the lives, families, and careers of countless Americans and to society itself. By adding these proposed conditions to the list of qualifying conditions in the MMMP, this board can take a step toward undoing some of that damage. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, request Dakota Cerna to the microphone.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dakota Cerna, and I stood before this panel in 2014 to help get PTSD added to the qualifying conditions. And in that time, I'm still here. I've been smoking cannabis and ingesting cannabis every day since that day, and I'm still here. I can still talk the same way. My body parts aren't falling off. And I'm here to speak on behalf of other people who haven't had that chance. This panel gave me my life back. And I would like to see that for everybody who suffers from any kind of debilitating condition. It doesn't matter to me what condition it is. If their fingernails are falling off and cannabis relieves it, they should be allowed access to that. More recently, I'm developing some symptoms from my exposure to burn pits in Iraq, and I have a rash that's growing all over my body. I can show you a little bit later. We got time, but this was as red as that exit sign up there yesterday. And just a little bit of cannabis topical oil has cleared it up, and I still got to wait for the doctors to tell me what exactly it is, but just like that. Cannabis is changing lives just like that. And I would just like you to consider, and please, I don't want to ever have to come back here and do this again because it's a long drive, but we need to get on board with morality and ethics and treat these people for conditions that Western medicine has kind of tossed aside, and I'm still suffering from the prescription medications that were prescribed to me years ago. I'm still recovering from those damages that they have done to me. And in the time that I've spoke to this panel in 2014, nobody has died from cannabis. Like I said, I'm standing before you telling you that it's changed my life. And there are children, including my daughter, who is going to develop the same condition as her mother and her grandmother, that don't have the option. But I would love to be able to use it as preventative medicine as well, because it has extended the life of my girlfriend and her mother. They would not be here if it had not been for cannabis. I wouldn't be here. And there's many more people that have my story. And there's a lot more conditions that are on the docket today about what can get added and what doesn't. But I urge you to vote yes on everything. I'm living proof. There's living proof behind me that cannabis is not dangerous. It's saving lives, and I urge you to continue that work. And I thank you for saving my life. I really do, from the bottom of my heart. You guys saved my life. You made me a better person. I'm able to be a father to my daughter. I'm able to live. I'm able to feel like a good person, and that's thanks to cannabis, not to the pills, not to anything else, but cannabis. That's the sole thing. I hate to say it over and over again because it's beating a dead horse, you guys know. And, I appreciate you guys for keeping your eyes open and giving us a chance to do this. But that's about all I got to say, so thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Alan, I may say this wrong, Peisner to the microphone, please.
Good morning. My name is Alan Peisner. Thank you for allowing me to speak. This panel has the opportunity to correct for 80 years of injustice caused by the federal government. The federal government lied to the people of this country when they banned cannabis with the reefer madness attitude. The real reason was economic, because of the fiber, because in the 1930s, cannabis became very profitable to produce fiber. Now, by allowing all these medical conditions, you can correct for that. It is the right thing to do. When Congress was actually considering outlawing it in 1937, the AMA attempted to protest this. They weren't notified because back then it was very commonly recommended by doctors. And Dr. Woodward actually tried to speak to Congress and they shut him down on this. So I'm asking you on behalf of all the medical conditions listed to allow the safest medication for all these conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I ask Jim Powers to come to the microphone?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Powers. I'm the executive director of a group called Michigan Parents for Compassion. We advocate on behalf of children with very severe and chronic illnesses. And one of the things that we've been very passionate about is fighting for the right for pediatric cannabis patients to have access to that medicine in the state of Michigan. And it's been a long, hard road for pediatric patients. I'm not sure if you're aware, I'm sure you are, but this board passed on a recommendation for autism, which is now rearing its head again in front of this board due to the director of Laura declining to allow it to become a condition. And there's 21 additional conditions there. And what I've been racking my brain about and have not been able to come to a resolution on is that Laura, the department that allows or governs this board, actually is in charge of licensing doctors in the state of Michigan. And it's concerning to me that we have a substance that has been determined to be therapeutic by the voters of the state of Michigan, and it's been acknowledged by the state in the form of establishing a licensing and distribution system for the substance throughout the state that is also governed by Laura. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we want to put the trust to determine when it is appropriate to prescribe or recommend certain medications or substances for patients to doctors. And it's been incredibly frustrating for me personally and just for the community in general. The autism example is a great example because the last petitioner, a woman by the name of Lisa Smith, and her son Noah came in and talked to the board and compelled the board on why it should be, why autism specifically should be an approved condition and the improvement that they saw in her son. The reason that one is so specifically challenging is because this mother came out in public and said she was grateful that her child had epilepsy because she was able to access this medication. And that makes me crazy. What an insane thing that a mother would be grateful for their child to be struck with such a serious condition because they had another serious condition that ran parallel to it, and they don't feel they would have received any relief. I know it's not in this board's power to legislatively change the act, and I know that we're stuck with what we're stuck with, which is that we have specific conditions within the act that are approved, and our group and others will continue to try to act legislatively to change that. But in the meantime, I would stress to this board to approve any condition that comes in front of it and do everything that you can to put that trust back into the hands of the providers of the medical care that we've entrusted through licensure to treat these patients in their very serious and debilitating conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Chad Carr to the microphone.
Hi there. Thank you very much. My name is Chad Carr. Thanks to all the panel members for being here. I was involved in helping to bring these petitions to you, and the conditions that were petitioned fall roughly into three categories. Number one, conditions that are mentioned by the Institute of Medicine report 1999, which is cited by Section 2 of the current Act. There are far more conditions in that report that physicians are using medical marijuana with efficacy to help treat. Number two is conditions that are cited within the United States patent on marijuana. There are several conditions that are cited within this. Again, conditions that patients are finding relief in cannabis that physicians are recommending cannabis for. The third class are conditions that have been added by other boards, much like yourselves, in other states, that have been added to show efficacy and to be allowed to use medical marijuana under those states' laws. All of these conditions have substantial information within these documents that shows that they are efficacious for treating the conditions. What's more, people are currently using it illegally. This board can't despite its best intentions, recommend medical marijuana for everybody in the state of Michigan. There's always a physician beneath you that's going to be doing the recommendation, that's going to be monitoring the efficacy of marijuana. All you can do is cut it off as a possibility. The conditions that are in this in the petitions today that are before you are serious in some cases and are less serious in other cases. And they have all shown efficacy with marijuana as treatment. People should have this option. They should be able to ask their doctors for it. The doctors should have this in their toolkit if they deem it to be appropriate. I wanted to also testify personally on behalf of Parkinson's disease. I have observed the treatment of Parkinson's disease. I was here originally many years ago when this panel voted to approve Parkinson's disease, and I believe it's a bit of a no-brainer based upon the discussion that the panel had at that time and the ultimate vote that was in favor. At that time, the rules did not allow it due to not having a quorum. There weren't enough people there, even though it was a positive vote for Parkinson's. I'd like the board to really consider reapproving it at this time. I have seen people treat Parkinson's with medical marijuana. It's the most visual display of miracle treatment you've ever see in your life. Parkinson's is a very, very visible condition, as most people know. There is rigidity and tremors that go along with it. And as people have treated it just with a very small amount of vaporization, they can't even breathe deeply. It's just a bit of sniffing almost. And the tremors and rigidity subside within minutes. It's the most miracle thing that I've ever seen in my life. And the idea that patients would be criminalized for using it is, to me, I think, what this board is here is put in place to account. And I appreciate all of you being here very much, and I appreciate everybody else out here, and I thank you very much for the time you guys have done.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Okay, next is Michael Comorn, Comorn Law. Microphone.
Thank you. Mike Comorn, Comorn Law, I'm the attorney for the petitioners of the conditions we're asking you to consider. And I just wanted to add one thing to consider with your contemplation. I know the rules were discussed of how we got here, but there's some other important things, I think, from a legal perspective that are important to recognize. Any of the conditions that are before you to be considered would only be here if we had met the minimum requirements within the statute, which is that the petition has found this current medical, empirical, evidence-based data, including both of the following. That is, summaries of the evidence that the use of marijuana will provide palliative or therapeutic benefit for the medical condition or treatment of the medical condition. And I say that because that is the review. The question is whether it's going to be palliative and therapeutic. And that is the same standard that's bestowed upon the physicians who are determining whether or not the patient has one of those conditions. And I say that because, as everyone here remembers, we were here a few years ago regarding autism, and it was, I thought, a very compelling experience because the panel voted in favor of approving it, which I found to be very empathetic and sympathetic. And as we know, the LARA director at the time rejected and gave various reasons. One of the things we thought about regarding the autism was filing a motion to reconsider or something to that effect, but I mean, we can say that people on this panel have already approved autism. And I just want to discuss for a second some of the reasons why it was rejected by the director of LARA at that particular time. And just make a couple comments in your consideration going forward for both for autism and the other 21 conditions. And, and these are concerns that you might hear, but I just want to put them in some context. As the former director said, initially health professionals have expressed concerns regarding the lack of clinical studies and evidence-based practices relative to medical marijuana's use by autistic patients in general, and specifically with children. At the July 31st panel meeting, the state's chief medical examiner, Dr. Eden Wells, noted the lack of studies regarding the epidemiology of biological effects on children using medical marijuana, and bemoaned that there were not more clinical trials to provide checks and balances on the benefits versus its possible ill effects. Now, I just wanted to comment on that and maybe be persuasive for Dr. Wells. It's understood, and I know that that is a statement that is concerning for the children's well-being. I understand that. But there's been no reports of children using cannabis and a reported terrible side effect. If there was, I'm sure you would have pointed to it and identified it. The purpose here is not to determine if it's a cure. The purpose is not to determine if the evaluation of the clinical trials. The presentation of the evidence as it was made was whether or not it's therapeutic and palliative. That's the legal standard, and I know that I'm speaking to physicians at times and other people that are involved with this administrative panel, but it is something to think about because, we've heard many, many times that there's not enough research, there's not enough studies. But this is the dog chasing its tail because it remains a Schedule I, which by definition would mean that it doesn't have any medical benefits. Yet the state of Michigan has a medical marijuana program, which would suggest that when 3.3 million people voted for it, there was a declaration that it is no longer a Schedule I. But the federal government still has it as such. And the people that are presenting themselves and will testify today will explain those therapeutic and palliative effects, which should give you reason to vote in favor of these particular conditions. The other things that were interesting in the opinion, which I think are important to mention, are number one, for the concerns of the physicians and the oversight of the children or any other patient that may be certified to use medical marijuana, that in the opinion of the former director, he had concerns that there weren't enough strict measures over the physicians to be able to supervise the certifying of patients. My argument, and he mentions in the opinion, is, there's got to be at least 2 doctors for the children in order for anyone under the underage needs 2 physicians to sign off on, and the parent is going to be the caregiver to provide the method of ingestion and frequency of use and dosing. And the director specifically said there is no legal mechanism within the law that requires that the doctors have this supervision. And I thought to myself, this is the director of LARA. He's the one that licenses the physicians. Is he saying that the physicians that are being licensed are going to do something that's antagonistic to their license? I mean, I think it's a fair assumption that all those licensed physicians that LARA maintains, those doctors are in good standing, are going to do the right thing. I think they should be given the benefit of the doubt that they're not just going to sign off so some child can have weed. It's not like that. I'm suggesting to you that if they have a license and authority to sign these things, it's implied that LARA believes they're doing the right thing and they're keeping with the Hippocratic Oath of doing no harm. So I would ask you to consider that as well. Additionally, there was a lot of concerns over the method of ingestion that was taking place at that particular time, and some of the testimony of the parents was the use of non-smoking cannabis oils, rich Simpson oils mentioned, medibles and whatnot. And the director at the time had a lot of concerns about that because there were some questions of the lawfulness of that particular substance. Since then, in 2016, the legislature amended the law. The idea that medibles and other food products and non-plant material was illegal to possess is no longer the case. In fact, they rewrote the law, in Section 4, allowing a wide expansion of protections for a whole new list of items, marijuana-infused products, they call them, in forms of gas and liquid and solids with greater volumes that you can possess, And I say that because if those were the concerns, you should understand about this law. It was written in 2016 it went into effect in December, and it had the application retroactively. I just want to say this because it was written in a way, I've never seen, as a lawyer for 25 years, I've never seen a law implemented that was retroactive and intended to cure, it's written within the amendments, intended to cure the failures of the legislature to perform its duty under the Act, which is to protect patients from arrest. So this amendment and its retroactive and curative effect was an acknowledgement that the legislature had failed. And I know they're speaking to these medibles, they're speaking to these oils, and they rewrote the law allowing retroactive effect where people could actually go back and undo their convictions if they were convicted for possessing these unlawful substances. So you have that as well. If that was a concern, that should be eliminated, and you should know that the legislature spoke it and has empowered you to recognize that protections and curing these flawed thinking is what is the legislature's intending and doing here. And I guess finally, I know that there's going to be a lot of patients that are testifying, and there's a number of reasons I think you can make conclusions about the various conditions. And I think at the end of the day, really the final assessment is the physicians are in a position to protect patients who are using cannabis from arrests. The MMA, we're in our 10th year now. The state just implemented a regulatory scheme where it's going to be collecting taxes for the sale of marijuana. There are going to be regulated dispensaries where patients can go and access cannabis with labels, and this is the future. So the idea that that we were just in a world of just uncertainty, there's no more. I mean, the state is getting tax dollars, which to me is an endorsement for the program more so than ever. And the expansion of these conditions, which we've provided all overwhelming evidence, peer review articles, that they are therapeutic and palliative, support the premise that with the state's endorsement, that it's time to expand the program to other conditions and allow relief for people, most importantly so that they don't get arrested. Still, unfortunately, the statistics in Michigan remain that arrests are up for marijuana 14% and forfeiture proceeds $15 million. It tells you that it hasn't really been implemented like it's supposed to. Hopefully that will change with the state's new program and a new view by the law enforcement community. But it starts here by expanding the program and allowing more people to be under that umbrella of protection. So I would encourage you, after hearing the testimony, to vote in favor of and passing these new conditions and adding to the list. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It appears to me that a number of these petitions are generated by your
Yes.
law firm. And when I read the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, it seems to talk about debilitating medical conditions, serious illness. And I'm wondering, as I consider these petitions for our next meeting, do you hold these petitions, or should we hold these petitions to this standard? And I'm looking at a petition right now that says non-severe and non-chronic pain.
That's right.
And I wonder, does that meet a standard of debilitating symptoms or serious illness?
Well, I would say, the first response is I don't know that that's the standard. First, I think that you're really at a standard of finding, because this is where we're at right now, because the administrative rules clearly articulate that what has to be included in the petitions to get here, and those things are specifically empirical and evidence-based data, including both of the following: evidence that the use of marijuana will provide palliative or therapeutic benefits for the medical condition or a treatment of the medical condition. So anything that, because we submitted more petitions, some were rejected for various reasons, but those that made it here at least met this particular standard. Articles published in peer-reviewed scientific journals reporting the results of research on the effects of marijuana on the medical condition or treatment of the medical condition, and supporting why the medical condition should be added to the list of debilitating medical conditions under Section 3B of the Act. So I know you're reading into the word debilitating condition as the threshold, but I don't, you're adding it to a list of debilitating conditions, is what I would argue, and nothing in the requirements suggests that it has to be severe, so to speak. It is a debilitating condition, and only if the petition does not contain current medical empirical evidence-based data as described in Subrule 1 would we not be here today. So we've at least met some threshold of evidence-based that the conditions cited would bring it here for vote. Now, your question is important because you want to know to what level you're holding it to. And I would say that my argument is that the only way to interpret this is that is whether or not it provides therapeutic and palliative relief to the particular condition, the identified condition. That is what the doctor is going to be evaluating. And if the condition's on that list, the doctor finds that there's palliative or therapeutic relief, they will write the recommendation. To get there, though, we have to recognize that there's problems, that the disease or condition is one that is real and that exists. The ones that we've cited here, you're going to hear from the persons, are acknowledged in the medical literature. No one's saying that pain isn't real. And I think also what you're going to find on that particular issue of chronic, non-chronic or non-severe, or what you're calling pain, is that, you know, I think it's fair to say we're in an opioid crisis in the state of Michigan, in the country. And my example would be a weekend warrior athlete goes, twists an ankle, rips his shoulder, goes to the emergency room, has a reset or what have you. The line of treatment on the way out is going to be an opioid. Would it be fair to say that a physician could write a recommendation for cannabis instead? I have a friend who broke a rib playing pickup basketball, became addicted to Vicodin. I mean, those are the choices that I think are for physicians to make. The question of whether, you know, the choice of medicine should be on the physician if they find that therapeutic or palliative relief would work. And you don't want to limit the physicians on that. And I think that to hold the bar so high at this point is really not what this law is intended in. And we shouldn't get hung up on that if there is evidence and clinical-based studies. It doesn't require clinical trials. Remember, the MMA is supposed to be the clinical trial. If we don't pass these conditions, we're going to have criminal trials, and the whole point of this is trying to protect those people so we don't have those trials. And I don't want to go on too much, but that somewhat answers your question.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Normally, and as I said, the panel tends to receive the information. I think that was because of the coordination of the petitions. I think that the question was appropriate. So I thank you for that. I'd like to ask Chris Barrett to come to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Chris Barrett. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I have a whole body that's question. So what is Tourette's? It involves involuntary tics. They can be verbal, so to speak. But with that being said, I have the full body Tourette's, which is involuntary body movement. And with that being said, it's I've had it pretty much my whole life, ever since I can remember. And it's strung me through quite a lot of severe pain, at least a half a dozen broken ribs, 2 major back surgeries. I deteriorated my disc in between vertebrae 1 and 2, and they rotted and pulled my spinal cord out. A month later, I jerked the rods back out, and they went back in and refused it again. Luckily, they had a belt that I wore took care of the fusing process, and I actually fused this time. Now, with that being said, I was on a slew of medications, pharmaceutical medications, and I eventually got addicted to, I believe it was Percocet medication. With that being said, that led me to the methadone. It was a downhill kind of thing for me. I was sleeping all day, every day. It was Klonopin, Seroquel, it was just overwhelming. So I was getting nothing out of life. My son, I was not enjoying my little boy. I missed a few years of his life, pretty much. And with that being said, you know, I was using cannabis, smoking it illegally before, and it was helping me a lot more than the medicines were helping me. Now with that being said, I actually found holistic health. Went with my medical records for many years, and you know, I'm getting approved. And I had no idea I was getting approved for my chronic pain, which I have. I didn't know that I wasn't getting approved for my involuntary body movements. This is news to me. So when I heard about that, I said, well, let me get these people to understand what this is and how serious it is. My disability that I get, they don't have a category for it. It's not a condition that you will receive disability per se for. It's not severe enough. Mine just happens to be that severe. So with that being said, they categorize it with Parkinson's. They just throw it right into that severe category. With that being said, I really, it blew my mind when I found out I wasn't getting this for my involuntary body movements. Now, what we need to do is get this on the qualifying conditions, so people like myself, and I am almost glad that I have chronic pain, so I can get this. Now, that's kind of sad to say that, but it's honest. I'm actually glad that I'm getting, oh my God, right? With that being said, before it gets to this point, let's get this on the recommendation. Let's get this on the qualifying list, so these people can access this cannabis and get relief like I get, and get their life back. And a lot of these people don't want to go out in public. I've been called a tweaker. Everything in the book, I'm scared of. What's wrong with him? I mean, I've seen it and I've heard it all. So, with that being said, I really appreciate you allowing me to speak today. Let's get this on the qualifying condition list before it gets to my point. Thank you very much.
Okay, Jamie Cooper, I'm going to say Gastric, perhaps? Do I have that right? To the microphone.
Good morning. So I moved to Michigan in November 2014 and came here from Colorado. And I'll kind of get into my personal story. You know, I came here, I was in Colorado when the big legalization boom hit, and I came here and I wanted to be a part of this. I saw that there was a great opportunity to be a voice of this and be a part of this. Now, at that time when I came here, my son was 2 years old. Right about 6 months, we realized that there was a pretty significant delay with him. He stopped breathing at birth, and then by a year old, he was in physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, which he has been receiving since. He's now 5 years old. And when I got here, I was just, my son's delayed. And as the years have gone by, that delay, that gap keeps widening. And finally, teachers, doctors were like, we got to figure out what's going on here. And I found a pediatrician that she pretty much said, I will go out of my way to figure out what's wrong with your son and how I can help you. And she referred us to a neurologist and a geneticist, and we started with autism evaluation. And, you know, my son is not your typical autistic child. I mean, he's pretty mellow, but he's considered moderate. His delay is pretty significant. You look at him and he looks about like he's 3.5 years old. he got the diagnosis for autism in the fall. And next week we start ABA services. And unfortunately, I heard this week that the ABA services could be cut soon. And that frightens the heck out of me. And lately, so as we move forward, like I'm starting to see more autistic characteristics out of him. You know, his behaviors are starting to get pretty serious, where we are starting to see more meltdowns in public. I took him to the butterfly garden in Grand Rapids a couple weeks ago, complete meltdown. I had to hold him tight right in front of everyone and carry him out. He's starting to self-injure himself. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. And the developmental delay keeps widening. And last week we found out his nutrition is bad. And it's because he's so hyperactive. Getting him to eat is really difficult. So 2 years ago, I was hosting events for the business community. 2 years ago, I did a panel to talk about autism, and there are like 3 people in this room that were a part of that panel. Thank you. There were 3 people in this room that were part of that panel, and that panel changed my life. I just realized this need, and autism keeps, more and more kids are getting it, are getting diagnosed with it, and yet ABA services are getting cut. The stories that I hear every day, I can't ignore. It makes me realize this is why I do what I do. And it's especially close to me now that I'm dealing with my son. We started using CBD with him. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone as well as I'd hoped. You know, when you're a mother, the first thing that you do, you think CBD, and you're interested in looking into cannabis. The first thing you want to do is CBD. Well, the first thing a mother wants to do is try hemp CBD. And sometimes that can not be a good situation. Sometimes these children's behaviors can get worse. And that's what happened to my son. I realized within like 15 minutes of giving it to him, all of a sudden, you know, the hyperactivity got worse. Well, last night I had the honor of attending an event that was put together by one of my clients who is very focused on the autism effort in cannabis. And she brought in Tikkun Olam. And Tikkun Olam is an Israeli research team that they are the front runners on this. And they, I stood up and I talked to them about my experience in giving my son CBD and just the lack of information for parents who want to just consider this. And they pretty much said is you need the THC. We have found in our studies that THC is really important with this. And this morning I got a call from them after speaking last night, and they wanted me to let the board know that they are willing to give full access to the data that they have on autism. And you know, I can give a phone number to the lead researcher on it, and they are happy to help with this effort here in Michigan. And you know, like they did a study that they released over the last couple of months that showed that overall the children improved by 75%. That is significant. You know, it helped with hyperactivity, communication skills. I mean, there's just so much that it helped with. And you know, just in February, Newsweek had an article talking about how cannabis could be the most effective treatment for autism. I mean, that's mainstream for Newsweek to put that out there and confidently put that out there. I felt like was a really big deal. And right now there are 9 states that have autism as a qualifying condition. And I feel like we have such a great opportunity with the regulatory structure. We are now going to have licensed establishments where people, mothers, are going to be comfortable going into and getting the education and getting the information they need on cannabis. And we have the opportunity here in Michigan to have the best medical program that our country has seen yet. The FDA is looking to approve a cannabis-based medication for epilepsy. And at that point, if they do that, we're recognizing that this is medicinally beneficial. And when that happens, we're looking at rescheduling or descheduling it. And you know, why not just go ahead and make this one of the best programs that anyone has seen? And you know, if autism is added as a qualifying condition, my work does not stop here. You know, I want to develop resources for parents because I was once that parent that just needed that information. And now I feel driven to use my skills and expertise to create some sort of resource for these parents that need information. So they don't have to go and just try CBD and then deal with these adverse effects with their children. I mean, and let's go into anxiety and depression. Just imagine the anxiety and depression that this causes parents having to deal with these type of children that just, I mean, it affects their entire life. My personal story, last year I lost my, well, in Colorado, I thought I was using it recreationally. I stopped using it and realized how much it was helping me. I was choking on vomit in the middle of the night, and it was relaxing my esophagus. And I didn't realize that it was helping me in that way until I had stopped. And then, you know, and it changed my life personally. Well, then last year I lost my sister to alcoholism, 36 years old. The reason why she was using alcohol was to treat pain, you know, like emotional pain, anxiety, depression. And this can become debilitating. I lost my sister because, and she was in Texas. She was always asking me, how can I use this to help me not depend on alcohol so much? And I had to tell her, I'm sorry, I can't encourage you. You were in Texas, and I can't bear to see my nieces get taken away because you're using something that's federally illegal. And in Texas, she didn't have that option. I almost lost my mother. I lost my dad of pancreatic cancer last year, so my mother is going through some really hard times right now. And I almost lost her to a fentanyl patch. 6 weeks ago, I almost lost her just because she just wanted something extra to help her through. I mean, she lost the love of her life, and she feels like she has nothing left. And so, I've been asked to give you guys what describes a debilitating disease. Michael Camorn asked me to give this. But it's any medical condition that's approved by the department. So my ask is definitely, like, consider approving all of these. I think we have a huge opportunity here, and I would rather see people use this use this as a go-to before they are given some other medications that could just really affect their life in a negative way. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Amy Carter to the microphone, please.
Asperger's, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder when he was 2.5. Since then, he has had seizures, he has a connective tissue disorder, and he's had multiple other mental health diagnoses that kind of fall under, the anxiety, the OCD, and different things. He has gastrointestinal issues, he has asthma, and basically, I went on a journey to save our family because he got extremely aggressive and violent. He does weigh 165 pounds now, and at 110 is what he weighed I've been on a journey to help my son and save my family. I say save my family because my autistic son, who is now 11, has extreme behaviors and aggression. I've gone to many lengths to get my son the proper care, therapy, and medication for him to be successful in this world. After losing my career in 2012, I dedicated my life to helping my struggling son and my daughter, who is living in a very unhealthy environment. Not only did I try just about every pharmaceutical offered for children, I also served on 2 boards, helped start an autism center, became an instructor for the National Alliance of Mental Illness, met with politicians, and utilized every resource available in our state. And I also worked with community mental health. I meet with them once to twice a week for the last 6 years. I'm the appointment queen. I utilize every program that the state offers to me, and they have been very helpful in a lot of ways. So I do thank you for that. My son has been hospitalized for over 127 days since he was 5. He attempted suicide at 6. He was put in a holding cell by the police at age 7. I've had ribs out of place, black eyes, cuts, welts, and bruises. He struggled in school. His classroom has had to be evacuated on numerous occasions. He has damaged school property and physically attacked the staff on several occasions. I've been using cannabis to treat my son's nausea and migraines for the last year. It has worked better than anything I've ever tried for him. Not only have I been able to wean him off of 80% of his pharmaceutical medications, it has changed our lives tremendously. My son has not been physically abusive, and his aggression is minimal. He is doing excellent in school. The teachers, therapists, and psychiatrists are amazed at his progress. Not only has it calmed his behavior, it has reduced his anxiety, and it's almost as if it has unlocked his brain. He started doing things that he's never done prior to cannabis. He started talking about his future. He's mindful. He started communicating better and thinking before he reacts. He also started problem solving on his own and has empathy towards others. For years, I lived in survival mode, not knowing what was going to happen next. At one point, I almost had to sign my rights over to the state because CPS was worried he was going to hurt me. We were at U of M Ann Arbor Hospital, and they came up and told me that if we could not find him a bed and place him in a mental facility within 24 hours, that they were not going to let me take my son home. And I fought for 5 years. I fought politicians, insurance companies. I learned about pharmaceuticals. You know, I was in a very bad place. I was getting abused on a day-to-day basis. I would have to hold him down sometimes 8 times in one day. He'd verbally, physically attack me. And it was a really bad place that we were in. And I've still been getting emotional at where we are now, thanks to cannabis. I'm so thankful I've been able to medicate him with cannabis oil. It has given him the ability to be successful and have a life that he's never known before. It has also allowed my daughter and I, who's 18, to regain our lives. I still get emotional when I think about how we used to live and how far he has came. I'm in Lansing today to testify that my son's life changed because of medical marijuana, and I feel other families should have the same opportunity. There's a family that weighs heavy on my mind every day. This family has a very similar story, and they finally got to the point that they did sign their rights over to the state. Their son, who's now 15, who has cognitive impairment and should not be in a jail setting. He now sits in a jail cell at a state-funded facility, and I wonder every day if cannabis could have changed their lives too. Please find it in your hearts to assist these Michigan parents who are often on a dead-end road to try this natural alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the panel members, at any time I'll entertain a motion if you need a break. Otherwise, I was planning it at 10:30. Does that sound reasonable? Just for a 15-minute break. I have Jennifer Cook come to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Cook. I am a patient and caregiver here in the state of Michigan. I want to talk to you today about organ transplant. It's very near and dear to me. My grandmother was a recipient of a liver transplant. Unfortunately, due to complications, rejection, things like that, we lost her within about 4 to 6 months after she received that transplant. So as research comes about with organ transplant and how cannabis can help, obviously it sparked some interest in me. So I've done a little bit of research, and what I have found is that THC actually acts as an immunosuppressant. It goes in, it deactivates the amount of T cells that are created with the PD. A new organ is added to the body, allowing the body to accept the new organ. Researchers have found that it also decreases the inflammatory response signals. It increases the survival of the graft tissue. It fights against graft versus host, which is one of the biggest issues when you're talking about organ transplant. And as far as statistics are concerned, there's about 116,000 people on the donor list right now waiting for a transplant, with only 20,000, less than 20,000 on an actual donor group, people willing to donate an organ. So these people wait for a very, very long time. And with a 30 to 60% rejection rate, now that doesn't necessarily mean that an organ is completely rejected. It means that there's some kind of episode that happens, whether it be host versus graft or some kind of other episode that happens. 30 to 60% of people who receive an organ go through that rejection episode, and it's caused by those overactive T cells with a foreign object in the body. So cannabis and THC actually eliminates that problem to a certain degree. And it goes in and acts as an immunosuppressant, which our doctors give to these recipients. They give them pharmaceutical immunosuppressants, which work in some cases not, but they have a long list of side effects, including severe tissue damage, headaches, kidney toxicity, increased susceptibility to infection, tremors, headaches, hypertension, diabetes, and the list goes on, and then you bring in cannabis and THC, and the list of side effects for that are you're tired, you got dry mouth, they're very, very mild, and most certainly not severe. So at the end of the day, I think that, we as Americans have a right to choose everything from our house, our cars, our spouses, and everything in between. We should definitely have that right to choose our medicine. Cannabis is a safe alternative. It should be an option offered to these patients. And they're finding that by treating cells in a research environment, they're treating mouse cells on the recipient as well as the donor tissue, and then when they add them in, that rejection rate goes way, way, way down. So I'd like this board to consider adding organ transplant onto the list of qualifying conditions. With cannabis as an immunosuppressant, the obvious side effects are much less. And I'm sure that if we add, Michigan's going to start to see our transplant list of transplants. By adding organ transplants to the list of qualifying conditions, I'm sure Michigan would see a rise in successful transplants and a decrease in rejection rates. But most importantly, these people will have a chance to live and appreciate that very, very precious gift that they were given. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Peter O'Toole to the microphone.
My name is Peter O'Toole, from Michigan, caregiver and a patient as well. I've been for the last 9 years. Very early on in becoming a caregiver, I'm familiar with this law. I went to a great deal of effort to learn about the very specifics of this law, the intent of this law, the scope of this act. And the first thing that I want to point out is that this was a people-initiated act. This was not initiated by legislation. In other words, we didn't ask our legislators for permission to do this. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just stating that as a simple fact. The scope of this act and the intent of this act was to keep people out of jail for using marijuana as a medicine. The very first thing that I experienced was an illegal arrest. Was a case where they charged me with felonies for choosing marijuana as a medicine. I followed every point of this law. In my lawyer's own words, I was the best case that he had ever come across because I crossed every T and I dotted every I. I communicated with Melissa Peters, who was in charge of this program. I asked her, how can I legally transport marijuana? How can I legally do this, legally do that? How can I follow this law? I had every single one of those papers in my folder when I was pulled over by law enforcement in Bay County. That trooper Stoppa, said these words to me: I refuse to acknowledge the validity of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what he said to me. It wasn't up to him. We didn't ask his permission any more than we asked the legislators' permission. This was an act that was passed by the people. Okay? Now here we are today. I beat that case, by the way. I beat the next one that came after it, too. 9 years later, I'm fighting another case along with my wife, Jennifer Cook, who's just up here. Because there is a large gap between legislation and reality. Between the people's will and reality. Now what stands between all of that today, with everything that we're addressing, is this board. These people who are recommended by a doctor who have these conditions are suffering. They have pain. Their conditions are debilitating because the doctor says so, not because we say so. Because the people in the state of Michigan recognize that the current medical system needs an alternative. Now, when I seek that very legal alternative, the last thing that the state of Michigan has a right to do is to interfere with my treatment of my disease or my relationship with my doctor. And that's exactly what is happening over and over and over and over again. It's upsetting. It's frustrating. My family is being attacked by the government of Michigan unjustly. No question about it. And we will prove it in court for the third time in 10 years. I am at risk for going to jail for choosing to use a medicine that the people of Michigan already approved. Now to back this off a little bit and to address the conditions that we're talking about today. The condition of asthma was filed in my name, on my behalf, by my attorney. Asthma is pretty basic. It's a lung condition. It interferes with breathing. I don't think there's anybody in this room that can't comprehend that. I'm trying to be simple for a reason. The very simple solution is to open those capillaries in the lungs, to expand the lungs. Now, if you look at the studies that involve cannabis in the lungs, they all agree on one thing, or a few things actually. It expands the lungs, and it opens the capillaries. It increases the volume of air that we can get into our lungs, and therefore the amount of oxygen that can go into our blood. We can test this with a very simple tool that we can buy right at the pharmacy. It's called an oxygen saturation meter. You put it on your finger. Many of us have had it at the hospital and the doctor. It gives you a percentage of oxygen in your blood. Now, what I witnessed over and over and over again with asthma patients, lung cancer patients, COPD, and many other conditions, is that when you use cannabis, you put that meter on before, you consume some cannabis, and those numbers go up by up to 10%, almost immediately. That simple. The science behind that has already been explained. It increases lung function. It opens the capillaries in the lungs. It's a matter of fact. Because it's been studied as much or more as any treatment by the FDA. Whether it's been studied to their criteria or not is secondary. Common sense and reality must play a role here today because of the gap between legislation and reality. Because of people like me and Jennifer Cook and Christy O'Toole and the many hundreds more that are fighting daily in your courts for our freedom. Because we choose to use marijuana as a medicine. The reason that marijuana works for so many conditions is also a matter of fact and science. You know, and I haven't heard the word endocannabinoid system mentioned today. Maybe it was before I got here. The endocannabinoid system is as real as your respiratory system. It's taught in medical school, right here in the United States. We have an endocannabinoid system. That is a matter of science and fact. That endocannabinoid system consists of some very simple things for the sake of this conversation. They're called receptors. They're in our brain and throughout our bodies. The role of this system and these receptors is to regulate all of these systems. When a baby takes its first suckle off of a nipple, when it's born, the most prominent substance in that breast milk is cannabinoids. It makes them hungry. It helps fire up their respiratory system. It helps regulate their breathing. It helps open their capillaries. It helps do a lot of things. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. And I don't need to be to understand the very basic thing here. It's therapeutic and it's palliative. Why? We'll leave that to the scientists and the doctors. But we're not going to deny the very obvious evidence that 60% of the state of Michigan agrees with, that we need an alternative that's legal, that doesn't come with the risk of being arrested for making that choice. It's not a game. To deny any of these conditions would be to deny the very science and facts that were presented to you here today. To deny that we have an endocannabinoid system. Or to claim that you have more understanding about that endocannabinoid system than maybe I do. You don't. Nobody does. What we do know is that for thousands of years, cannabis has been used effectively as a medicine for almost every condition known to man. Why? Once again, because we have an endocannabinoid system that is throughout our entire bodies. Because it causes inflammation to decrease. 99% of all pain, if not all pain, is caused by inflammation. Asthma is an inflammation of the lungs, that's by definition. Cannabis is an anti-inflammatory, the most powerful anti-inflammatory known to man, as far as I understand. You apply this to each and every condition before you. I don't think there's any question about whether these questions are debilitating or not. I don't think there's any question about whether cannabis can help them or not. It's a matter of fact and science. You know, and at the very core of this, I think it comes down to a human right, a very basic human right. A very basic human right to live and to exist. And to treat myself as if I'm going to live and exist. Now, if we were standing here today and we had a medical system that we could rely upon and didn't need an alternative, we could have some entirely different conversations. But as has been testified here today by this young man with Tourette's, by the mother with the children living with autism, it's very obvious that once again, there's a gap between our medical system and the reality that we're living in today. The medical system has failed people living with autism. The medical system has failed people living with Tourette's. Why? Because our legislative system is out of touch with reality. Now I'm going to give a little testimony about autism. I didn't plan on this, but after hearing a little bit today, I felt moved to. And I'm going to make it real simple and real quick. On 3 different occasions, parents who had children living with autism that I knew firsthand, who came to me for advice, had nonverbal, all 3 of them nonverbal. Didn't communicate at all, did not look their parents in the eye. All 3 of them today have one thing in common. With less than $2 in medicine, with less than $2 worth of cannabis oil, each one of them, within the first 24 hours of being exposed to this medicine, looked their mother in the eye and said the exact same words. I love you.
I witnessed that. The number of other experiences that I could share with you that are just as or more powerful than that testimony is endless. I'm not going to waste your time with that. I would instead ask you to believe this young man's story right here. When he spoke, I knew he was telling the truth. So did you. His experiences with Tourette's, the medical system, and because of the legislative system, being out of touch with reality is inhumane. He's got a basic human right to live and exist. It's reasonable for him to expect his doctor to recognize and treat his condition with every single thing available. He's got a right to expect for his condition to qualify for Social Security disability. Are you kidding me? There's no category for Tourette. Oh, you weren't blown away by that today? A perfect example of the legislation being out of touch with reality. Now recently we've had legislation who, as my attorney stood up here and said, for the first time in 25 years, had language in it that included the words curative. That speaks volumes. It acknowledges that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. I'm asking you to see the very same problem and do what you feel obligated to do to help fix that. And to recognize our very basic human right to treat ourselves as if we're going to live with marijuana or any other substance that is proven and been used for thousands of years and is accepted by the majority of the people in this state who initiated this act with a very clear intent. And that was to keep people from going to jail for using marijuana when a doctor recommended it. It's that simple, folks. I'm sick of going to jail. I'm sick of waiting for legislation to catch up with reality. We're tired. And it's on you to do your jobs today and decide favorable for every one of these conditions.
Thank you. We gave you an additional 3 minutes, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Cook. All right. And how's the panel doing? I've got 3 more cards. Do you want to go through, or does anybody need a break? I'll entertain a motion. I hear a push through over here. Pushing through, okay. All right, next speaker, I hope I say this right, Josie Scoggin, to the microphone.
I think she stepped out for a moment, but I know she wants to speak. If you could pass
Should have taken that break, shouldn't we? Okay. Okay, all right. Brenda Scoggin.
Brenda's right there. Okay.
Hey, can someone fix that microphone so she can,
That's great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a little brief story. I was diagnosed as a child having a rare chronic joint disorder. I wasn't properly diagnosed until my 30s. My daughter was one of the first minors in Michigan in 2010 for chronic pain. And I would like to state to the board that you should accept all of these recommendations. Medical marijuana has been voted by 3.3 million people for medical use, and we are behind the board. 10 years it's been in legislation for 10 years. We've fought for autism. This is our numerous times for autism. You guys had still not added anything prior to that previous in 2012, 14. It's been so long ago I can't remember. But we sure are tired. I can sit here and tell you just from my daughter being one of the first minors, I get a lot of phone calls from other children, other mothers that have are desperate for any type of 10 minutes of pain-free or quality of life for their children. We could talk all day about how it helps autism. I have several children. One of them, Tegan, she would not have qualified if it wasn't because she had cancer. It should not have took cancer for this child to get a medical marijuana card. That's absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. Another thing, you want to talk about research. There's tons of research out there from the University of Michigan. It's been going on since the early 1940s. Go to cannabisresearch.a-z.org. You'll find all the information for decades that we've twice. So please, I urge you to pass all of these immediately.
Thank you. Back to Josie Scoggin.
Can I nurse with her? She's like, I tried to pass her off, but she won't go anywhere. Can I nurse her still?
There's a state law about that, Josie.
No problem.
Everything you could imagine.
She's sweet. I don't think anybody has a problem with that at all.
Can I take this? This is great. This is perfect. Everything you've done is great. My name's Josie Scoggin. I'm president and founder of Sons and Daughters United. We've done $79,000 in free legal care. We provide legal care to children, families, and young adults that have fallen victim to unjust and unfair policies across the nation. Unfortunately, about 80% of our legal care that we do is for, I don't think it's 20%, is for marijuana. Here in the state of Michigan, marijuana and sorry. Here in the state of Michigan, marijuana arrests have increased by 23%. They are higher than what they are in the state of Indiana, which is, I'm from Niles, so I have to tell everybody I'm from South Bend. When we take on a new case, what we do is we have a form to fill out on how much money they make and what kind of medical conditions they have. When we were reviewing it, 90% of our cases report depression or anxiety. I want to just go over really quickly, now that you guys don't know, what happens when you catch a nonviolent drug charge, even something as basic as marijuana. First of all, you lose all your state funding in terms of going to college. You lose your FAFSA. You lose the eligibility to go and apply for a student loan that you still have to pay back at 6.9%. So you lose any possibility of having a future. You lose the ability to become a doctor, a lawyer, and a lot of other professions that are, number one, needed here in the United States, but number two, also good paying jobs. So what happens is these children, these young adults, and families come to me and they say, Josie, I've got depression, I don't have a PTSD diagnosis, I don't have chronic pain, I got busted with an eighth of weed, what do I do? And I say, well, it's fine, we'll help you out. And they say, oh, 30 days in jail. And nothing is more discouraging to a patient who is already depressed, who already has anxiety, than a jail cell or the possibility of a jail cell. So over the past 4 years, we are a nonprofit organization. We are registered not only with the state, but we are also a 501c4. And now the free. You know what that does? It allows us to lobby, and we thought, surely we can just join the game, pay some money, we can get this heard. I was here along with a lot of everybody else, and I've been trying to find people to come and talk about anxiety and autism and things like that, and a lot of them were here for the autism vote. They remember you guys voting for them. They remember that feeling of finally relief. And then they also remember the denial that came shortly after. And I know now we have a new director, which is amazing, and I'm so excited for that. And so really quickly, almost all of our clients do have depression or anxiety. We spent $79,000 trying to clear that up. And a majority of them have ended up on probation, which is also a costly expense. And even some of them have lost custody of their children just for using what in other states would be considered medical marijuana. One of our cases in particular is a lady who moved from California. She's a veteran, but she did not have a PTSD diagnosis. as with a lot of vets, the VA for the past several years, and maybe even now, has bounced them around, and getting a diagnosis and being at the VA is really so without that diagnosis, she didn't have any legal access to medical marijuana. That being said, like many other people in the state of Michigan, she self-medicated. She got caught. She went through our system. We spent $10,000 on her case. We thought for sure this was going to go through. She got rough. Everything was great. She thought. 2 weeks later, CPS came to her house, found the marijuana. She doesn't have a PTSD diagnosis. She's obviously disabled and obviously experienced extreme trauma. She caught again another 6 months of worry, heartache, and eventually she lost her child, custody case, to her estranged husband. So not only was she here in Michigan, where she thought, you know, I'm just as sick here as when I was in California, maybe I will get some relief. So I can't help but wonder if maybe we were able to add conditions like anxiety and depression, how much less work we would have to do as sons and daughters, and how much more time and more money we would have to spend on actual cases, real life criminal justice, or criminal injustice. And I think that by approving anxiety and depression, we will be able to help the majority of the people who are currently self-medicating. Because whether it's legal or not, they're still medicated. So do they deserve a I think so. And I know that you guys think so too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Charmy Golson to the microphone.
Hi folks, how's work? Good morning. You all right? My name is Charmy Golson. I'm a lifelong resident of Michigan. My father was a Washtenaw County Deputy Sheriff when I was a little girl in a career military man, and I'm incredibly proud to come from a law enforcement military household. I'm here today to testify on behalf of the brain injury and spinal cord injury petitions. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I'm a patient. I lobbied this panel. What year did you pass PTSD? It's the only condition that's been passed. 2014. So I was here. We lobbied effectively for that. I want to thank you for passing that, because now I'm no longer considered a criminal for using medicine for PTSD. I'll give you a quick little follow-up on that. I have complex PTSD from being prostituted as a child by my mother in exchange for drugs. As you can imagine, that pretty much sets you up for failure in life. The baby's father, Dakota, is a veteran. He was a Marine. He was in the Second Battle of Fallujah. He's one of my good friends that I talk to about PTSD. We help each other. And I actually called him about 4 months ago, and I was like, I'm ready to take whatever pharmaceutical pills you got to stop this. I don't know what else to do. And he laughed at me, and he said, Charmy, there's no pills. There's no pill to stop triggers. You have to use the medicines. So I use concentrated cannabis oil, and I have consistently since before you passed this law, let's be honest. And I just upped my dosage, started going back to yoga, and it's incredible. It's way more effective. There are no pharmaceutical drugs to help folks like us with these kinds of issues. And we're dangerous if we're unmedicated. Really. Like you ever see me go off? All my friends are here. They can all stand up and go, yeah, remember that time? It's not good. So thank you for passing PTSD. So I'm a reporter, I'm a writer, and I used to work for cops that want to end the drug war, lead law enforcement against prohibition. So after we passed the 2008 Medical Marijuana Act, I had this little paper, and I would travel the state, and I would always ask people, how are the cops? Because my father was a police officer. And that is how I started learning about the vicious SWAT raids that were being levied against patients and caregivers way back then. And so I run a campaign called Stop the Raids, and we work to reform the state's civil asset forfeiture laws. All of the aggressions towards patients and caregivers are done in the name of civil asset forfeiture. So it's critical. You listen to the gentleman back there talking about his police encounters, and it's just so critical that you guys see our God-given right to practice informed health care and use the medicines that we deem to be safe and effective so that we can heal our families and protect our families from police encounters as well. So I'm here to talk about my best friend. Can I use her name, or is it not okay to talk about another person? Like, I'm not sure what the laws are, the rules are. So I witnessed the healing of the brain injury and spinal cord injury through my friends' experiences. I don't know if you want me to.
Well, I mean, it's always best to not, unless you have the explicit approval, because you may be talking about some health information.
I do. But she said I might not be. It's Robin Schneider. My best friend is Robin Schneider. And in 2013, I was on the phone with her when she had a stroke. She was driving in the car, and she experienced a full-on, I didn't believe it, because I was like, oh, she's like, I can't feel the right side of my body. I was like, gosh, that's a stroke, but she's 35, and I kept talking. And then her speech got slurred, and I said, you got to pull over. And I met her at the hospital with marijuana. And I do have her explicit permission to talk about this. She actually, let me just read the text that she sent me about her disorder that, let's see. It's important to mention that they handed me a stroke recovery handbook and offered me painkillers and told me there was nothing else other than rehab that they could do. I had significant cognitive damage, couldn't read numbers. I turned to cannabis in capsule form, spent a lot of time doing brain exercises, and today I'm traveling all over the country as director of finance for a multi-million-dollar campaign. And she wishes she could be here today. But she's very successful in her job. And, you know, I was with her during and immediately after this. She couldn't read. Her mother took a giant sheet of paper and wrote the schedule down. Get the kids up, feed the kids, wash yourself. I mean, it was an amazing thing to watch. And to see this full recovery like this. She's still got some issues. She's still emotionally numb, which I believe is an asset when you're working in drug policy reform, quite frankly. And one of the reasons why she's so effective is that sort of stroke side effect of not being overly emotional. Is that a timer for me?
No, you're
okay.
Fine. You're fine.
So yeah, it was remarkable to watch. And when we did the PTSD panel, there were plenty of fathers of veterans that came and pleaded to go ahead and pass this for their sons and that kind of thing. And that's why I'm comfortable here doing this for her, because I've just seen what this does. And you're hearing lots of advocacy stories today, I'm sure, for all of these things. When we passed the law in 2008, I literally felt like, hippies, please stop with the miracle plant crap. I was alarmed at what I was hearing people say. My office for my newspaper was in a building where there was a dispensary, the first legal medical marijuana dispensary in the state, the Third Coast Compassion Club there in Ypsilanti. And over the first year, I watched dying people come into the dispensary. Like, this is what happens in Michigan. When you're almost dead, the doctor says, well, you know, I can't do too much more for you. Why don't you go try some of that natural stuff now? And so we watched all these dying people come into the building and get better and bring in giant bags of pharmaceutical pills that they no longer took. So I stopped saying, hippies, please stop with the miracle plant crap. And after I watched teenager Alyssa Irwin from up north cure her brain cancer with concentrated cannabis oil, that was the final straw for me. Because I also I'm not a scientist. We're Indian, I'm Hunkpapa Dakota, and my friend Robin is actually Chalagi, she's Cherokee. So for me, this is religious, but there is also science. And I'd like to ask the panel, how many of you have actually read the petitions? All the petitions? Can I ask questions? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, we're not here to really answer questions, but, you know,
But I'd also like to know, like, how many read the actual petitions, the actual documentation that was attached to the petitions? It's unbelievable to me. I actually had a chance to review.
They've all been presented to us at the time 2 weeks ago or so,
Yes.
and have all been being reviewed, and they were great. That's why.
And doctors, good. That's great. I appreciate your answer, I really do. Now, we know it's a lot. We know that it's over 5,000 pages. But the critical part of it is that it's, and I do have notes here. This act was intended to not only cover a great deal of conditions, but also to expand that coverage as new research is completed. And these studies are, double-blind placebo studies that the government conducted. I was stunned to read all of this. I didn't look over at all of it, and I would imagine that would be quite a task. But if Michael Comorn didn't already say this to you earlier, I will say it now. The act was intended to be a location for clinical trials, and instead, it's been a place for criminal trials. Because over the last 9 years, I've been in courtroom after courtroom after courtroom, where the main goal of the prosecutor is to remove protections provided within the act, because then you're subject to forfeiture. So they attack again and again the patient status. Well, I was in Allegheny County this week with Michael, and there's a guy, he's a caregiver, he's got his cards, and the 25-year cop on the stand says, well, I know marijuana, I've been doing this a long time, and that's not for personal use. And so Michael was like, sir, how many patients do you know? How many patients do you hang out with outside of prosecuting them? And the answer was 0. You guys get a chance to see all these patients, and you get a chance to review the information, and we're relying heavily upon you for the safety of our families, both physical and regarding the criminal justice system. The last thing I want to leave you with is that as a woman, as a mother, I'm here to advocate for the health and well-being of the people, because the gateway to earth is inside of our bodies, and we're charged with the health and the well-being of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comment cards to bring before the panel? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry, I did hear one and it was.
Second? You want me to?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, Chairperson, Dr. Eden Wells.
Aye.
Dr. Ronald Bradley. Oh, he's absent. David Brogren. Here, okay.
Aye, for adjournment.
Oh. Yeah,
Aye.
okay. You're fine. Dr. David Crocker.
Aye.
Dr. Jean Lewandowski. Dr. Robert Noiva. Chairperson, your motion has passed to adjourn.
For the panel, we will be meeting here, and also this meeting will occur with deliberation on the petitions on May 4th. It's a week from today at 9 a.m., still here at this particular site. For the panel, I think there was some housekeeping information, just if there's a slip in there for travel information if needed, if you could give that to our clerk. The other issue will be is I'd like 5 minutes just off the record where we can convene just to discuss how we want to organize next week internally. Because that's a large number of petitions, and we want to make sure that we cover each with this important merit.
That's probably.
Oh, I'm sorry. We want to keep it open? Okay. For the Open Meetings Act, we can actually discuss that on the record. That's fine, absolutely. Can we withdraw the motion to adjourn, and we'll have to bring that up again and reopen the meeting? Can I hit my gavel? Does that make a difference? Okay. All right. I don't think we need a roll call, just roll forward. You can say we're just back on the record at this point. So, to withdraw the motion, can I say all those in favor to withdraw the motion, say aye? Aye. All those not in favor, say nay. Any abstentions? None heard. Just to carry some business so that everybody's aware of what the plan would be, I'd like to hear some discussion regarding the organization of the 22 petitions. There are ways to categorize those. I don't know if any of my colleagues have thought about how to approach that. We can also go one by one, which I think would probably be the most reasonable way to go. But
there will be some conditions that will require more discussion than others, so I just wanted to entertain any thoughts or viewpoints from the other panel members.